Hi, this is somewhat of an impromptu video. I just got off the phone with a fellow named Vincent, and Vincent sent me his NuTone model 2055-2056 Intercom master station for repair. This is not Vincent's unit. This is one that belongs to me that I have on the shelf for some reason for the future. Vincent just got his set back. Like all of our customers, he's responsible for reinstalling the master station and hooking up all the remote speakers and putting the system back together. Vincent had some questions, and Vincent's questions were good, but they also reminded me that, and this is one of the things that I get reminded of around here all the time, not everybody knows everything that you know. Vincent is a really, really nice guy, and his 2055-2056, the repair of it was excellent. It worked so well, perhaps one of the top 3 or 4 that I've done in the last 10 years. It was just phenomenally great. It was very clear in talking to Vincent and trying to answer his questions that, like a lot of people, he has actually no idea what to do to put this back in. Hooking up wires is one thing, dealing with the rest of it is something else altogether. And again, I'm often reminded, not everybody knows everything that I know. So a 2055-2056 is a vacuum tube model. There's no transistors, it's all vacuum tubes. And this is just a used set. So it's a little dirty, it's a little grubby, but it's how you see them for the most part. In speaking with Vincent, and Vincent's first question was, he hooked up all the wires, apparently, for the remote speakers, connected power, turned it on, and he said it did nothing, which would be very unusual, maybe, but maybe not. When I have people call with something like that type of conversation, oftentimes I will go over some of the most fundamental things that people need to sort of understand about their equipment, in that it helps them do what they need to do, which is reinstall it. And one of the things that I asked Vincent, I didn't really ask him. One of the things I said to Vincent was, so you're familiar with the fact that you have a vacuum tube model. There was a long pause, and he said, okay, if you say so. In trying to get anyone to relate to their equipment, they need to have some basic understanding about it, which I guess is completely unfair on my part, because it's not the kind of thing that most people probably would know. And I find that daunting to know where to begin to try to explain all of the little intricacies that you sort of need to understand when you own something like this. So this may not be the most comprehensive video in the world, but it's primarily being made for Vincent, because I want him to get his set back in the wall and working, and I need to do something to help him, and showing him in a video is probably the best way to do it. So this video is not about repairing a 2055-2056. I have a series of videos about that already. It's 5 or 6 parts, I think. It's not about vacuum tube technology and how vacuum tube works and the amazing physics of vacuum tubes. It isn't about any of those kind of things. It's really, I think, going to be about the things that an owner of a set like this need to look at when they get it back. To quote Vincent, it was packaged extremely well. When we send sets like this back to people, they're packed really well. I do it personally. They're double boxed and wrapped up more than anything else to ensure that the very nice aluminum faceplates don't get smashed or bent during shipping, because you know how shipping companies are. So it was packaged really well. However, even with all the excellent packaging that was done on it, sometimes during shipping, things jiggle loose. Because shipping companies, you know, I told him he lives in Pennsylvania and we're in Tennessee. Who knows how many times the box was tossed from one place to the next along its travels. And one of the things about vacuum tube models are, vacuum tubes, here's one right here, vacuum tubes stick up off the board and they have mass. They weigh something. If you look at it, and I'm going to put my finger on the top of this one, and I'm going to show you a close-up, but if I do like this, I can wiggle the tube. Because vacuum tubes, what I sort of started to try to explain, and I realized that it was not going to go the way I wanted to on the phone conversation. Vacuum tubes, they're not like put in the sockets and locked into place like this, and that's where they stay forever. Vacuum tubes are small little glass envelopes with little tiny pins on the bottom that fit in sockets with little tiny holes in them. And when you plug them in, you know, the little pins, they're only about 3/8 of an inch long, and you plug them in the socket like this, and there you go. It's in place. However, if the UPS guy kicked the box, dumped it out of the back of his truck, fell off the conveyor belt, whatever might have happened along the way, sometimes tubes get out of whack. And that's not good. Everything needs to be in place. One of the very first things that I suppose needs to be done is you need to make sure that all the tubes are seated in their sockets correctly. Now this set has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vacuum tubes. Each of the vacuum tubes should be plugged into their socket. See, that one was up a little bit. Each one should be plugged into their socket solidly. And see, that one's crooked too. That one's okay. This one has a sort of a shield around it. They need to be seated in their sockets so they're sticking up vertically and sitting flat in the sockets. They should not be pushed off to the side or leaning out of the sockets or crooked like that. They should be seated in the sockets correctly. And see, and even when I did it, I had to readjust it because it was leaning off to the left. Also, another thing that came up, which apparently is not common knowledge, is if you start plucking tubes out of sockets, nothing works. These are what makes it all work. If you unplug them, take them out, nothing works. So you got to have the tubes in place. So the very first thing you should do is you should check and make sure that all your tubes, after shipping, are plugged in place. Of course, this is easier to do if you're standing in front of it instead of off to the side. That one goes there, and we'll put this one back in here. So you have to check that. You have to make sure that all your tubes are seated correctly. There should be nothing else in here that you need to worry about. Everything else is either soldered in place or with a bracket or screwed down or something like that. So that should not be an issue. It's only the tubes that might possibly jiggle loose. One of the other things about tubes or tube sets is that tubes, as we said, fit into sockets. Sockets get old. Sockets are made out of some kind of plastic or phenolic resin, kind of Bakelite stuff, and they do get wear and tear, and sometimes when you plug tubes in, the sockets don't always grab the pins of the tube super well, and they can be more jiggly than even this one is. This is a tall tube, so it's got more whatever on it. You have to make sure that they're plugged in correctly. There wasn't any problem with the sockets on Vincent's set as far as I can remember. If there had been, I would have replaced some of them, and they didn't need to be replaced. They were in pretty good shape. These sets, usually not too much of a problem with sockets. Every now and then, not that much. So that's number one. Number two has to do with this. This is the power connection for the entire set. This plugs into a socket that's in the wall housing. Let me get that socket for a minute. This is the wall housing for a NuTone 2055-2056. You have the switch box assembly here, which is on the back of it. You remove this out of the box, and on the back of it, that's where all the wires from the remote speakers get connected up. That's relatively easy to do, and everybody who sends a set like this for repair gets a copy of the installation instructions that show how to hook up the wires. That's pretty easy. Over here in this top corner of the wall housing right here is the power socket. So this is a 2-pin socket, and it matches up with the 2-pin plug on the back of the 2561. Now, this design, which is common on all tube radios, is referred to as a safety interconnect design. And the idea behind it is when you remove the screws from the front of the master station and you slide it forward slightly and tip it down so you can get to the back of it, it automatically unplugs the plug on the back of the set from the socket inside the wall housing, thereby disconnecting the power from the set altogether. Why is it done that way? It's done for our safety, of course, because sets like Vincent's 2055-2056 have high voltage in them. the highest potential voltage inside this set is 130 volts, plus or minus a little bit. 130 volts can hurt. And what I mean by that is, if you start poking your fingers around in here, or even worse, underneath, even though it's got a insulating cardboard on it. If you start poking your fingers around in here, or even worse, you start going like this with a screwdriver thinking that you're going to somehow make something better, you could have a very unpleasant surprise, because 128 volts hurts a lot, and it hurts particularly well, or badly I guess, if for some reason you're leaning on the chassis here with your wrist, and you've got your screwdriver here, and you happen to be touching the metal of the screwdriver with your thumb, and you jab it in the wrong place. You're going to lock up like this, and you could get really hurt. And manufacturers, they have this real aversion to electrocuting their customers. Not a good idea. For sets to have that all-important UL listing, or whatever other safety listing it may have had back in the day, they came up with a design like this, where it automatically disconnects from the power, so hopefully you won't electrocute yourself. One of the things that Vincent told me, which concerned me, I would say, was that, and I assume this may be actually a reasonably common thing, but see, the way I think it should never be, because it's not the way it's supposed to be done. In his case, I mentioned to him in the beginning attempts to sort of get him up to speed, and then realizing that that wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. I told him, well, when you have it folded down off the wall, it automatically disconnects from the power, so the set is safe, so you can check the two. And then I realized that wasn't the right approach. And one of the things he said to me was that, oh, well, mine is different than that, because when it's folded down off the wall, it's still plugged in. And I thought, pardon my French, oh crap, because that means what somebody did. And then I said, so before we get to what somebody did, he said there's the socket, and the socket, it has this metal plate, and it plugs into the plug on the back of the set, and then there's wires. So what somebody did was they removed the screw, and they removed the plate from the wall housing. This is the electrical junction right here. So basically what he had was this, and this was plugged in to the back of his set like that. No, 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 no. Okay? Bad, bad, bad idea. Because that means that this chassis is live all the time. No, 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 no. Very dangerous, especially for civilians. Okay? Me, I can do it because I understand, I know what to touch, I know what not to touch, and so on and so on. And do I work on sets when they're live? Absolutely. When you're aligning a tuner, or you're doing some kind of troubleshooting, or whatever it is you need to do, oftentimes you're doing it live. And you're being really, really, really careful while you're doing it, because one, I don't want to get electrocuted. Two, you don't want the smoke to come out because you shorted something. Three, you don't want sparks and flames, and then there's the running and the screaming and all of that. So no, 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 no. So what I told him he has to do is he has to put this back in here. Now, there's a fine point about this, and this goes back to the original idea, is that not everybody knows everything that I do. If you look on, there's the front of the plug. If you look on the back of the plug, you'll notice there are both white and black wires. And anybody who does any kind of electrical anything knows that black is hot and white is neutral, and the electricity flows through the hot and back out the neutral. Don't worry about that. It's not that important. Even though this is an AC powered set, it has, in quotes, polarity. The white wire and the black wire are there because when this is installed, even in 1965 when it was brand new, NuTone wanted you to connect the white wire to the white neutral wire of your house wiring, and they wanted you to connect the black wire to the black wire of your house wiring, so that when you put this bracket back in the wall housing like this, like it's supposed to be, the The black's on one side and the white's on the other side. And they correspond with the orientation of the two pins here, because this can only be mounted on this bracket one way. It can't be flipped over the way it's designed. See, they're thinking about you. They're trying to keep you from causing a problem by designing something that is as possibly, let's say, idiot-proof as possible. So I told Vincent, we came to an agreement. The agreement was that he would stop and not do anything for the next 2 days while I make this video and try to put it together so I can help him get his set reinstalled and he won't create a problem. One of the things he said he could do, and he understood about this, he understood about the bracket. He said he can turn his circuit breaker off because he knows which one it is, and he can remount this bracket back in the wall housing. And I said that you're allowed to do because it can only be reinstalled one way because of the way it's designed. You can't flip it around, you can't put it upside down, you can't do anything with it. It only fits in the wall housing one way. So that's what Vincent is going to do. One of the problems with impromptu videos is sometimes things don't get explained as clearly as possible. So we will do a quick review. Primarily what needs to be done if you get a vacuum tube master station back after its repair is you need to make sure that all of the tubes are seated correctly in their sockets and not tipped or leaned over, or I suppose it's always possible that one of them could have fallen out. And again, if the tubes aren't in place, the set doesn't work. And it's not like if you take one tube out, some things will work and other things won't work. It doesn't work that way at all. They all have to be there. So Vincent's job is going to be to inspect all of that and to make sure it's correct. He's going to put the power socket back in the wall housing like it's supposed to be. I believe he has already hooked up all the wires from the remote speakers into the switch box assembly. And it's a relatively simple design. Once you get that much done, it's a little hard to show because we don't have a lot of wire here, but we'll see if we can get this clip off here, make it a little longer. This design has a multi-pin plug. There are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 connections inside that. And ideally, or surprisingly, this matches up with the socket right here in the switch box assembly. And this is a really well-designed set because all you have to do when you go to put it back in the wall is you take the white plug and you plug it back into the white socket like that. That connects up the master station to all the remote speakers. It connects up to your antennas and you're pretty much good to go. So it's a relatively simple set to put back in, but you have to make sure that it didn't get jostled around too much during shipping. I hope this will help Vincent. I'm going to send him a link to this as soon as I get it published and give him some other, I guess, tech support on getting his system back up and working again, because it did work really, really well. I was very happy with it. It's always very rewarding when you put a set back together, you connect power up to it, some antennas, you turn it on and it warms up, takes 30 or 40 seconds or so, and it plays beautifully the very first time. I hope this will be interesting and perhaps helpful to someone, Vincent and others. Perhaps be careful when you have tube sets. If you don't know about them and you don't understand, ask questions about it. And I think I'm going to try to work into my ordinary day-to-day discussions with people who have tube sets more questions and answers to see if they have any idea of what they're really dealing with here, because I have a feeling that I've been taking that for granted, that people do have some understanding. And as I said, it's pointed out to me often that not everybody knows what I know. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.